Hi, my name is Michelle Brindle. I go by Sasi, which is derived from my family name, and I am a senior at Southern Oregon University, completing my Bachelor of Science in Psychology, and today I'm going to be presenting on that journey through psychology and where it's going to take me. So, to start with my background, because it is fundamental in who I became today and where I am, I was born and raised on an island in Alaska that my mom immigrated to from the Czech Republic. Our population was around 3,000 people at the time, and so this was a very tight knit community. And I was raised alongside Sukhiak, which is the Alaska Native population. And then my mom, coming from Europe, had a very different approach to life. She was very intuition focused. I was raised in a very naturopathic home. She was a healer. My aunt was a psychic. And so I had a very different perspective on life and a blind perspective to the rigid Western systems, because our community did such a good job at integrating a very holistic approach to things. I was often using all of my senses, listening to where a bear might be, smelling foxes, identifying plants. Everything was very hands-on. And so when I moved to Oregon with my mom, I was finishing middle school, and it was a very different learning environment that I quickly realized I didn't fit into. It was very sedentary. There was one way to learn things. You were supposed to do it the way the teacher taught you. And so it made me feel like I didn't really fit in, which carried on through my journey through university. I ended up deciding to complete a bachelor's in biomedical engineering at Oregon State University that I did not complete. I actually changed my major quite a few times because I didn't, again, feel really like I was fitting in anywhere, and that learning style that wasn't working for me in high school was really amplified through college because of the heavy emphasis on test taking, as well as, again, lecture sizes that had up to 400 students sometimes, and again, very sedentary learning, which ended up leading me to decide to drop out of school. And I completed quite a few different careers trying to find myself from the ages of 19 until 23, and really ended up feeling very lost. But my dad had recommended I take these redesign classes, which were basically a transformative approach to looking at life. They used a lot of science-backed tools and methods, but they compiled them all into this very condensed coursework that was experiential. It was an online class, and part of that class was to do a community service project that showed how we apply these tools. And a lot of it was working with the community, enrolling people into our vision, and operating from a place of authenticity that was very vulnerable. And so we completed a garden project where we renovated an elementary school's garden, and we did it in 2 days, and we were not allowed to use any of our own resources or funds aside from our own labor. And this really just blew apart everything that I had started to build in my experience through adulthood about not fitting in and things not being possible and there not being a path for me. And so this really served as the catalyst that launched me into seeing what was possible. And so I actually decided to be a life coach, and there was such limited training that goes into this. It's really going through the classes, learning those tools, and then using those same tools to help future students. And then we would have our own life coaches that were helping us with our coaching. And so again, the way that this worked created so much transformation, not only for myself, but then I got to see how it worked for the people that I was helping, and seeing how much power came from reframing and shifting perspectives with open-ended questions and allowing the individual to discover their breakthroughs on their own instead of offering suggestions of what might work for them. Completely shifted the way that I saw psychology, because up until this point, I had seen many therapists over many years and was not able to create the transformation that I did through this very, very short program. And so, again, this really shifted the way that I saw what was possible and helped prime me for re-entering the world with a more positive outlook on how I could make a space for myself, even if I might not fit in. And because of all of that growth, I decided that I wanted a blank slate. And so I left my job in technology at the time. I had decided to stop life coaching for the time being and reapply all of those tools for my own development. During that break, I entered the music industry, where I became a drummer for the band Chicken Shark. I utilized all the tools I had developed during my gap years around pattern recognition and media and marketing, and ended up being the band manager for a band called the Bone Rollers. And during that experience, Josh Gross, who's the director for Puppeteers of Fears, noticed what I was doing for them and asked if I would be their marketing manager as they went on this national tour across the United States over the span of 2 months. So I really went a full 180 into the creative field. But that medical emergency wasn't so small. I had an emergency appendectomy that led to finding a tumor on my kidney that then was almost diagnosed as cancer. My oncologist was 99% sure. And because I had completed the redesign trainings and had a whole year of me living authentically uninhibited, I had a very positive mental framework that I was operating from and used this as an opportunity to learn about myself and why I might be going through this. And that was a really pivotal moment that launched me into my further interest of human sciences, because everything that I was experiencing in the Western medical system, from surgery to meetings with my oncologist, felt off, and my intuition was screaming that there's more and that there's something else that I'm missing. And so then I began looking into naturopathic medicine and found how so many cultures have these sciences that incorporate mind, body, and spirit, and they've maintained this connection to holistic healing. Yet the Western system that I was faced with, once again, was leaving out vital pieces that seemed to already be discovered through so many other sciences. So with the kidneys in traditional Chinese medicine, they're known as the fear center. And up until this point, I had felt like my early adulthood had been full of fear. And so I felt that that connection could not have been coincidental. I also had quite a few experiences with psychics around this time that really launched me into a new way of thinking and really started to shape the way that I progressed forward, which all really came together to highlight how I operate and what skills I possess that are unique to me and how they might relate to a future healing services field. My ability to connect with people, pattern recognition, hypervigilance. I started to re-trust the strengths that I do have, and with the tools now to advocate accordingly instead of shying away from spaces I might not fit into, made me ready to re-enter the educational path of completing my Bachelor of Science. And so one of the classes that really helped transition me back into going to school was my world religions class at Rogue Community College. This was a class that was required for my Associate of Arts transfer to get me into Southern Oregon University. And this also helped solidify that I wanted to pursue psychology. It gave me answers to so many of the questions that I had about human development and those sciences that I had already started to look into that were based from other cultures. It also gave me those gaps in Western systems that I had already identified, even on a political level. Something as simple as the United States not having a political advisor as a job role, but yet we're making so many deals and so many arrangements with other countries that are based in culture, that are based in religion. And if we don't even understand that, how do we have a foot to stand on? And so this really pushed me into that world of spiritual, psychological, medical inquisition. So the next step was to graduate from SOU. As I transferred, my classwork was very limited, and so I was left taking a term of psychology electives, which were luckily necessary for my degree, and had me take my behavioral modification class, which was again a wonderful transition back into the education model because it was an experiential learning opportunity that was project-based, where we were actively working on our own behavior modification that we selected and applying the tools that we were learning in real time alongside studying the psychology behind why it worked, what methods work, how they can be utilized, how different people respond to different tools. And so it really showed me a lot of the answers that I was wondering while I was a life coach, and really gave me that scientific backing for why things worked the way that they did and why they were so important for transformation. The last class that really hammered home those final questions that I had about human behavior was my behavioral neuroscience class, because it gave a biological model to a lot of those questions I had been wondering, and it gave me a visual to how neurotransmitters work, how they relate to psychological disorders, addiction, substance use, and really all of these different factors. We even learned about sleep and how less hippocampal volume can lead to PTSD. And so this started to affirm how diverse we all are and how many pieces are at play that shape who we are and how we operate, which gave me a really good understanding for what I felt would be a holistic perspective of taking into account biomedical and psychosocial models, which tied together perfectly for my health psychology course, because we were given a project throughout the course where we would be creating a theoretical program that would require grant funding. And at this time, I worked for Kodiak Area Native Association, which is a fully grant-funded nonprofit that has medical and dental, it has community services, it has child advocacy center. And so I was able to see how important grant funding can be. And then at the same time was looking into my own potential postgraduate education that might require grant funding. For my project, I designed a health curriculum that would be implemented at a middle school level that was based on experiential learning, because I had realized how important that was for me, and especially for young minds that aren't necessarily ready to sit still and learn in a stagnant environment. And so I created a program that involved the community. It involved hands-on learning through food, doing field trips out to agricultural sites, and it actually became a project that I started to realize could be something that I actually create at some point in my career. And so again, this was a really transformative experience to apply my educational path to a real world experience that I was interested in. So my takeaways from all of this is the professionalism I've taken from all of these classes, how I do fit into these Western systems, despite them feeling like they have a very narrow lens. With advocating and clarity on myself and my path, there is a way, and if there isn't, I can make one. Experiential learning is necessary for me, but I think is really a great view for how a majority of people could be learning. Understanding that everybody is so diverse that if people don't fit into this box, for myself, it was ADHD. In the Western world, it was considered a disorder, but in Alaska, it was considered a skill. I could hear a bear way before anybody else. I could identify things through senses. And so it made me really passionate to drive forward and hopefully shift the perspectives that people have around this. And then again, backing it with those biological models that I had obtained through neuroscience. And of course, the biggest takeaways were my own success strategies throughout all of this and what I need to be able to be successful moving forward. So what is next? I've been very interested in the field of parapsychology. There was a podcast called Telepathy Tapes where an experiment was done to prove telepathic communication with children who are on the autism spectrum that are nonverbal, and usually an immediate family member or sometimes a teacher. There's also a lot of studies that have started trying to prove collective unconsciousness, how the molecular structure of water changes based off of the energy around it, self-healing through meditation, the existence of other dimensions through quantum physics. We did a lot of studying of psychedelics in a lot of my classes, and so it definitely has opened my mind to what potentially could be studied on a very tangible scientific level for things that I've already personally experienced. And another one, which is how schizophrenia could be tied to psychic abilities. This is something that is not backed by science, but has definitely piqued my interest when working with individuals who have schizophrenia. But right now my path is targeted towards a doctorate in naturopathic medicine, which really encapsulates all of my lived experiences and education up until this point. My passion for a medical system that incorporates a holistic medical model, allowing space for the biomedical and the psychosocial, creating a space where patients have knowledge to understand the value of lifestyle changes and prevention alongside offering the benefits of modern science, and creating opportunities everywhere I go, hopefully, to educate around the indigenous knowledge that's already been found across many cultures, and then incorporating it in the current systems we find ourselves in. And that is my journey. Thank you.